What's up, y'all? It's Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and welcome to Premio's booth here at ISUS 2025, where we're hosting some discussions, some one-on-one interviews, some open-ended panel Q&As where we discuss the major trends that are shaping the security and surveillance industry and what role edge computing is playing in laying those foundations for the future of the industry. Today, we've got a partner panel discussion that we're going to be hosting here between Premio and Intel. So very excited to dive in and talk shop on how both sides, from hardware to software, are working together to support the major use cases that are decentralizing security and surveillance, that are feeding off this IoT and Industry 4.0 energy, and that are setting new standards for edge computing, processing power, and capabilities. So we're joined first by Dustin Situ. He's VP of Marketing at Premio. And we're also joined today by Mr. Jonathan Wood, who is Head of Software for Edge Computing at Intel. Yes, beautiful. Thanks again. Welcome to the two of you. How are we doing today?
We're great. So it's nice to meet you. Thank you, Daniel.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Dustin, how's the show been so far?
It's been ecstatic. The show has been great. Every year, there's more people who come. There's more innovation. There's new products that are coming into industry. But most importantly, I'm extremely grateful for Intel being a partner of Premio for so long to come by and kind of talk shop about what's going on in terms of edge computing, but how we work together in terms of the silicon all the way to the system level and pushing forward an edge computing solution that's fit for these new applications. So
I love it.
Thank you so much for joining.
Very welcome. It's great to be here. We're going to talk about systems today.
Oh, yeah. From silicon to systems. That sounds like a little sub-brand for a new podcast or something. Start cooking on that. So, Jonathan, since you are our newer guest here, why don't you give our audience just a brief rundown of some of your experience and work in the industry so they understand, what perspective you're bringing to the table today?
So, thanks, Daniel. So I'm the software guy as part of the organization. So my focus has been for the last 35 years actually working in software, really in the area of IoT and in the network. And so when on the rise of edge computing that we've seen, and it's not new, but it's certainly getting really fascinating, really super interesting right now with the advent of things like AI and vision, I'm responsible for ensuring we're bringing the software assets to really drive that systems approach that Dustin was referring to.
Right.
And that's really important because, we're building and focusing and optimizing the best compute platforms for certain different use cases across multiple verticals. We bring a lot of the software assets, and Intel's been doing that since its onset, over 50 years now.
Yeah.
And we've been in this particular segment over 30 years. We've worked with Premio for, long before I joined Intel. So a long, long time. So it's been a great journey.
I love it. Yeah, it's cool carrying the torch of a partnership like that, even when it started before your time, right? It just speaks to the important synergy that's shared between both of y'all sides of supporting edge computing. I imagine, and we'll get to you in a second too.
Oh, sure.
Talk across.
No.
But, I imagine being Intel at a show like this, you've got a lot of partners here, a lot of different companies you work with and support and cross paths with. So for a company like Intel, what are y'all's goals and missions when you come to a show like ISC West?
Yeah, it really is. It's really to try and help our partner ecosystem. We're an ecosystem partner-led company. Even though we maintain very close relationships with some of the largest enterprises in the world across multiple different verticals, it really is how we partner is crucial for the success of our business.
Yeah.
And so, coming to these events, supporting initiatives like this, ensuring that we're talking and listening to our customers, listening to our partners, allows us to build better products and allows us to be ahead in our competition, but also to serve our industry as best as we can.
Definitely. So for Premio, you summarize for me again, what brings y'all to the security and surveillance industry? I know that you've been at ISC West now for several years. This is not a particularly new vertical for y'all, but it seems like every year you double down. I mean, in fact, this is the largest booth y'all have had at ISC West yet. So, it's a little representation of the presence y'all are hoping to build here. So what are y'all's goals and missions when you come to an ISC West, right?
Yeah, sure. So number one, most importantly, based on what Jonathan is mentioning, that investment from the software side, that return on investment from Intel is very, very important. So like you mentioned, 35 years on the software side, where Premio has put its footprint in terms of hardware engineering, manufacturing, edge computing, the last 35 years, this is our specialty. So really the goal and mission here for security and surveillance is to really take all these transformative technologies. You're starting to see the IoT sensors from all these different cameras, like funneling into a compute heavy box that's using some type of computer vision with some type of, most important trend is this AI model trend. So lots of these trends are being shaped, right, in the cloud. These models are getting more intelligent. They're becoming more smarter. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you want to do the real-time inference for a lot of these mission-critical applications for like industrial automation, robotics, you need to have an ecosystem of software and hardware working together symbiotically in order to deliver a solution in the market.
Right.
And security and surveillance is made up of all those technologies that work together. Without the software, synergy, and the hardware, you wouldn't be able to have these new amazing type of applications that are coming out now with AI models
Right.
on top.
Yeah, I mean, just building on what Dustin is saying, is that there's so much innovation that's out there. It's a huge ISV or developer ecosystem that's building new applications and leveraging software platforms that exist. Predominantly started, we sort of leverage in the cloud. We see that, a lot of that, particularly around Gen AI and ChatGPT and Seek, and you see all these things. But bringing that into a device and a form factor and leveraging that on a smaller footprint, with, constraints around power, performance, it's our job to make sure we can bring that capability and make sure it works really well in these very, bespoke in some cases or very vertically focused applications in certain industries. And that's a challenge, and that's what we've really been working on. So it is software. It's building compute platforms that have, optimized for things like graphics and vision and inferencing. And that's what we've been doing for many, many years. But now, obviously, AI is sort of every stand you go to, somebody's going to have something about AI. Oh, you've been doing vision and inferencing for over a decade. So
you're ahead of the curve.
We're ahead of the curve, but also we need to ensure that, we're bringing the Gen AI element to it and providing the tools and capabilities for developers to test and train and land those new models on these nuts of devices.
Yeah. You both keep a pulse to the major downstream use cases that shape this industry, right? You, as a representative with Intel, right, are getting a lot of feedback, like you mentioned, from your partners who come to you and say, hey, our demand hardware side is, pushing for X, Y, and Z need. What can you complement that software side with? On your end, right, you are working directly with a lot of major players in security and surveillance, a lot of different monitoring applications who then, come to you and say, we need to be able to support this kind of workload. We need AI to be able to capture and process this data at the edge. So all that being said, I'm curious, what kind of feedback are y'all hearing from both of y'all's respective ecosystems? And I'm curious to hear where they match as y'all give your answer. But again, what's that kind of feedback that's pushing the security and surveillance industry forward today? I guess you could say major trends, but I hope to get a little bit more specific, right, around types of workloads, types of AI integrations, types of, networks of various IoT nodes. What do those look like today? What are you hearing from the market?
So I'll kind of start with the hardware side, since we've been doing this 35 plus years. So in the last couple of years, I think what's most important and what you've defined is where the workloads need to be distributed, right? And how we as Premio have distributed that and positioned ourselves in the market is what we've defined as the edge continuum. So the edge continuum is inference models or AI models that have been trained now in the cloud. But where our specialty is with our edge computers, rugged edge computers, is now moving out to the user edge. And that user edge is very mission critical. These are where the data is sitting closer to where IoT sensors are being generated. And with that data, we've differentiated 3 key buckets that are extremely important for us that allow our specific product lines to be positioned. So some of those buckets that we've defined are in the industrial edge, the rugged edge, and the specialized edge. And each of those specific buckets call characteristics that allow the product to succeed. So for example, industrial edge might not be as rugged, it might be more accessible, it might not need as wider operating temperature, shock and vibration, power input. But as you move more into remote mobile locations, that's where it's more mission critical. You need to be able to test for these power efficiency issues. You need to be able to test and validate for safety and reliability, mission critical power, all these things, what we're facing in terms of challenging with from a hardware level. And then at the specialized edge, right, there's specific certifications that allow the product to be deployed in these areas to where they can be successful. Without these certifications, you test for it hardware-wise, those applications will not allow for these type of hardware devices to be deployed. I think where the partnership with Intel is extremely helpful is not only are they investing on the silicon, right, that allows the ecosystem as system builders to build a system around that. I think Jonathan's team is valuable in providing that edge AI layer, right, because we need those open source libraries that allow some type of framework, or what we have defined in AI as blueprints, right? Yep. Blueprints are extremely important because it gives a foundation and a pipeline for these newer applications to build on top of that as layer. Right, so open source gives the flexibility. Hardware is there, has been tested and validated from there. We're starting to see amazing new applications with large language models, vision language models coming to play at the forefront, specifically for security surveillance.
Yeah. Yeah, just building on that, one of the things that you asked a question about, what the industry is looking for. So they're looking for is, bringing AI to the edge. So a couple of things. First, there's a huge brownfield ecosystem where Premio has developed and put these systems in. And people say, well, how can I leverage my existing footprint? I mean, there's literally millions of Intel computing devices out there, and particularly in the IoT space. So how can we leverage it? How can we do that? So making that more accessible and absolutely from a software point of view, we have enough compute. We do not need to put in a high-end accelerator, or we could do this on CPU. Whether you do need that additional horsepower, yes, our platforms we can plug in or add that capability through software. And that's where you see our compute roadmap and that compute continuum to really enable it. I think on the software side, there's a couple of things. So just on this, we're being asked, how can we benchmark? How can we right-size a particular system? And you get that a lot. And one of the things we announced just a week ago, March 19th, was what we call our Open Edge initiative. And part of that initiative is what we call Edge AI systems. So these are validated systems, blueprints, and benchmark for a particular use case. And I think that'll be really important for this particular segment. So there's some predictability, there are capability where you get validated systems for a particular type of workload. So that's number one. Yeah. And the second thing is that moving to more accessible for open source. Intel's been a big advocate of open source since the onset of this industry. Is that we are bringing what we call our Open Edge software initiative, a platform of software available to really get the very best out of our compute. Validated on this Edge AI system, with a wide range of software assets to train, to orchestrate, to manage that pipeline. Yeah, as you just not train the model, but you tune the model, and then you can completely retune the model as you go through. So all these things are really important. They're all very new for a lot of the industry, right? And we need to be there for them.
So what do you see downstream from that ecosystem, right? How are security and surveillance clients of y'all's putting that kind of software ecosystem and hardware support to work for what kind of specific workloads, right? Where are you seeing Gen AI get launched in security and surveillance in a way that is redefining or putting new pressures on, healthy pressures on that software and hardware ecosystem?
I think Jonathan mentioned something that's extremely important is the benchmarking.
Yeah.
I think the benchmarking is extremely important because we're still in what I believe is kind of an AI hype cycle. It's the innovation trigger is there. Everything believes AI is everywhere. But really, if you look at what AI is, it's a lot of data, most importantly,
right?
Machine learning models, right, that are being fine-tuned for better predictability off certain specific things. So large language models are traditionally trained with data. Those data becomes more intelligent, right? That large language model and large language models, there's so many different large language models. Each of those large language models are specifically benchmarked for specific things. So what I'm trying to mention is that each of these models can be benchmarked specific to certain applications. So I think what's helpful from a software side to a hardware side is that we have a variety of different edge AI systems. And within those benchmarkings, our end users can actually look at those benchmarks, look at the hardware spec, and enable what type of workload they need to do from an edge AI perspective, right? So I think one good example would be in terms of security or surveillance is using some type of IoT device from a smart camera. Traditionally, a lot of those smart cameras call them dumb sensors, but now it's all done in real-time inference. Those models can do hose detection, op detection, threat detection, using thermal, right? All these different things in real time based on some type of benchmark that's related to an AI model of some sort.
No, I think it's the use case, a vast set of use cases, right?
Right,
And that's what's so cool about it. It's not one thing; it's many, many things. But one thing that we recognize to try and help accelerate adoption, or not necessarily adoption, but just ease of adoption, is to provide reference examples.
Right.
So one of the things that we just did recently was to, in this particular sort of security and environment, is to bring forward something what we call a metro suite. Okay, so it's a suite of software that is accessible through open source, but it provides the blueprint of many applications out of the box. So if you want to implement a language model, a small language model to do inferencing, or if you want to start and to do some local Gen AI type experience for language or chat or linguistics, we're adding that capability at the edge with a series of reference software stacks that you can get. And so that will accelerate things. There's already, and the second other thing we're doing, we're supporting down the, onboarding an ISV ecosystem where we will continue to invest in that to ensure that we can showcase examples of how that best works on Intel compute.
Right.
But also bring that to our partners like Premio, who are predominantly focused on optimizing the hardware, but also you need to be in a situation as well where they can get access to easily demonstrate use cases. And this is one of the advantages of having a metro suite of software.
Yeah.
So look out for that. That's now going to be available at the end of April. So you'll be get that from Intel, and you can play around with lots of different applications.
Oh yeah, excited to see how that gets put to work.
Yeah.
I think to add to that, like to answer your question of what the industry is looking for in terms of these AI models, a lot of them are multimodal. So multimodal, before a lot of it was just text based into the large language model, but as you have multimodal, you have speech to text, image to text, video, all these multimodal benchmarks that are related to some type of application. The end user needs to be aware with the open source library to kind of build some type of application off that and deliver a solution, right? And as a hardware vendor, we rely on these open source libraries to basically showcase why our hardware is pushing from a benchmark standpoint, the most efficient, power efficient, most importantly at the edge, performance with the IO connectivity in a ruggedized box in mission critical type of application.
So that makes sense.
I love that. That's it, because some of these different, because it's multimodal, you can run some of this in a CPU. You can get the performance now with our Intel Core Ultra processors running in an NPU. Right. Or if you need that additional graphics, or if you've got many cameras, you're doing a lot of vision, a real-time processing, then you can move to a GPU, all software-based, all built-in, all integrated. That you can really start from Atom all the way through, and you can really size the platform for if it's a standalone use case, or if it's, in this case, what I love about what Dustin's saying, multimodal. And that, that's something that makes it a little more interesting, a little bit more complex. Right. So you don't want to be putting multiple devices in if you can try and leverage the same device and get the best performance. That's really important.
Yeah, I mean, seeing the maturity of how AI itself is being leveraged for these kinds of diverse use cases is pretty cool to see. And I'm curious how y'all are working together to respond to those kinds of market pressures, right? When you notice a trend and you start having clients come to you and say, we're looking for a solution that can support a security and surveillance, IoT network that needs to be detecting speech, motion, hose, that needs to be, also for access controls and deployed across a decentralized regional network. How are Intel and Premio working together to develop the solutions that will support that? Peek under the hood for us a little bit on that partnership.
So I can kind of speak to kind of how we go to market with Intel and why Intel is such a valuable partner for Premio. So if you pay attention to Intel's roadmap, they're heavily invested into their Core and Atom series. So Core is their performance socketed, right? Atom is an SoC that's low power efficient, low TDP. So if you look at those breakdowns, those are very application specific. And if you want to define it at the edge, where in the edge, right? So things that are more power efficient that don't need that much processing power, we'll probably see those in Atom, right? But that is extremely beneficial for a hardware vendor because then we can kind of especially for using a passively cooled design, we kind of package that all into a smaller form factor box, space constrained, right? And then in the core series, you're actually to deliver the multi-core performance that Intel is, known for, to deliver a lot of these new inference models, even on the CPU that potentially might not even need the GPU, most importantly. But I think kind of from a business perspective, what's most important and what we look at is the cost to performance ratio, right? Our job is to basically look at all the transformative technologies, right? Also bring something into the market that's going to be solving a problem. It can't be too ahead in the future, but also can't lag in terms of the technology. So what we do there is look at their roadmap, investigate what's the best, and then come up with our own product system level roadmap with the organization that's going to solve a lot of these problems. And then one more thing I would add is Intel's invested in the silicon level. So you're going to start to see more acceleration on the silicon level that allows the inferencing to be done extremely fast in real time from that silicon level directly alone without even needing a additional accelerator, which is quite impressive.
What I love about a partner that just my job for me is one of the greatest things when he tells me all the benefits of what we're doing on silicon. And he's absolutely right. So, but there's a few other things we're doing. I touched on this earlier. I think having, partners who's the voice of the customer, because they're talking to ISVs and they're talking to end customers, critically important, because it's how so we work very closely with getting that feedback and ensuring that we in touch with what our customer requirements, because they're changing so frequently, evolving. As what's so cool about this industry right now is it's really exciting with all these new use cases. So getting that feedback's number one. The other thing I touched on was the Edge AI system. So getting these validated benchmarking systems. So that's new. So that's a new initiative we'll work with Premio on to make sure that, we get that, certification of Edge AI ready. These devices, form factors that this organization has built are Edge AI ready. It's just that we want to make sure that we develop that roadmap and do that validation to give that benchmarking. And the other one is really just working on ensuring that we are providing that set of software assets that are very specific, optimized for a small footprint. Because we don't want something that's necessarily too heavy or whatever. We need to make sure that we operate within the constraints of the environment they're in. So these are the kind of things that we'll be working on very closely with Premio to ensure that that their customers are served as best as possible.
Love it.
Yeah.
Any other final notes on that one?
No, we're extremely excited on this new initiative that Intel is bringing to market for their Edge AI systems. Again, we rely on that benchmarking, but most importantly, our takeaway is it's an ecosystem. An ecosystem works together from a silicon to system, like you mentioned, and now with that, a software layer on top, that really allows the channel to grow, that allows the ecosystem to grow, and we really position ourselves for Edge AI and why it's so important.
I'll just mention one other thing as well. One of the things that we have introduced and evolved is what we call Industrial Solution Builders Program. Okay, so that really is how all the ecosystem comes together. And it really is about the ecosystem working very closely together, capturing requirements. It's not about running on your own. So we've introduced that program. Premio is part of that program, as are literally thousands of other companies.
Nice.
So that's where Intel will continue to invest in making sure that that ecosystem is well served and accessible to everybody.
Definitely. Yeah. So I'm curious, as we look ahead a little bit for this industry, we've already talked a bit about some of the trends that are shaping decision-making process around edge computing solutions within security and surveillance. And I'm curious what you see, even just a few more years out, what kind of customer needs are on the horizon? You mentioned multimodal AI needs, right? I have a feeling that will only increase. New modes will be added on top of that, right? For AI to have to support a lot of different pieces of data at capture and analysis of processing. But yeah, what do you see on the horizon for the industry? And how is that shaping the conversations you guys are having behind closed doors as you design new solutions?
Well, I guess from a perspective of things becoming more smarter and intelligent, this transition from where we are today with AI to, you may refer to physical AI as we start to drive into this space. The concept of being agentic, which is AI talking to AI. I think this is really going to be so fascinating. So this is where I see that will challenge the industry to keep up with that vision.
Definitely.
So that's where I see across healthcare automation, robotics specifically is going to be, I think, going to be an area where that physical AI will manifest itself earlier than other areas.
Right.
So giving us more time back, impacting our lives. We'll see that in automotive, we'll see that in robotics, and we'll see it in security as well, as you add those additional intelligence to it. So the whole challenge is in making sure we have the right compute platforms that can really scale to this new paradigm as well. In my job, being the software guy, is focused on making sure that I keep pace with ensuring that we're servicing that ecosystem of software innovation. So that's what I see.
Yeah.
I think Jonathan hit the nail on the head. I think we're on the same wavelength, because you mentioned physical AI, because that's exactly where I'm seeing the trend go. What physical AI is different in terms of what's been trained in the data center and the cloud. A lot of that is really already intelligent and already has the models. But where physical AI is shaping is kind of where we play in that sandbox. A lot of that physical AI is that shift out into the edge. And where you're doing a lot of that inference, it requires the physical AI to deal with the data in real time and deal with or make the decision with lower latency extremely fast. Because if you don't have that performance, or if you have the latency to leverage the cloud, you wouldn't be able to allow these new applications like robotics or security surveillance, right, to make that detrimental decision at that time.
Right.
Physical AI, I think one more major trend how it relates to physical AI is the ability for simulation.
Yep.
Right, in order to actually build out a digital twin, in order to simulate a lot of the environments for these smarter intelligent models to work, because a lot of that simulation is built off of synthetic data. And right, synthetic data for a digital twin is very important because it can map out things in the real world before it's actually in the real world. And how the model or the multi-model gets more intelligent is through the simulation. And in simulation, they're getting feedback. They're going to fine tune, and those go into different. You can use RAG pipelines to pull that synthetic data in, and then from there, you build off hardware, software, symbiotic relationship, and then you actually have agentic AI working in the real world, right? Navigating based on how it's becoming more intelligent.
Right.
We refer to that as like spatial intelligence. Yes, it's and the agentic aspect of that, where we're taking less of the model out of it, less of the human out of it, and leaving that more for, right, essentially, some people refer to software 2.0, but the continuation of training and retraining through AI itself doing that. You'll see that over the next few years, that will become more mainstream than it is today.
Nice.
Yeah, I think one thing AI, like they always say that, right, AI, you have a domain or a domain expert, right? What AI is doing is, you want to solve like a simple math problem. Would you want a PhD person solving that one problem, or would you want 1,000 fifth graders? Right. So with that, right, like think about it. I mean, yeah. So 1,000 fifth graders solving that, they'll probably figure out a lot faster, right? Dealing with what's going on, working together. Whereas a PhD student, right, whatever, only one person solving that whole. Yeah. So.
All right, 1,000 fifth graders ready to deploy. They're the ones behind the scenes making it happen.
They'll graduate to eighth graders as we deal with more of the simulation. But
so, last question: you both operate in a lot of different verticals. If we could do a little compare and contrast, or sort of a learning lesson from some of these other industries where we're seeing similar movement, whether that's multimodal AI pressures, whether that's more rugged deployments of edge compute, what can the security and surveillance industry kind of learn from how we're seeing edge compute, especially AI-powered edge compute, get deployed in some of these other industries y'all work in, that can be almost a signal to anticipate some of the changes coming to security and surveillance, or that security and surveillance can learn and say, hey, that industry is making really great use of multimodal edge computing AI for X, Y, and Z. We should be experimenting with use cases that match that.
I think it's a great question, and I'll tell you why. Because in the security space, for things like vision inferencing, it really led the way. I mean, we all know that the rise of the cameras or everywhere you go. So it had a position where it really was the kind of the lighthouse for vision, but it's regulated, and in some cases, and particularly when you're doing critical infrastructure or in public safety. So the pace of that innovation is regulated a little bit by the environment they're in. What I'm noticing in other industry verticals, retail is a great example, less regulated,
right?
And a lot of accelerated innovation. particularly around models and how we're using it for detection and identifying, solving for different challenges. There, I think that's where we can learn on the security side is really take advantage of these less regulated places. Also, different geographies. In parts of Asia, higher adoption or higher usage in some cases of these types of technologies. I think that's where I see opportunity for change. Manufacturing, what I love about that, again, extreme. We're talking about if a production line goes down, it's millions and millions of dollars of lost production time. So what I'm seeing there is they're building in more resilience into the use of these types of new technologies. So you're getting this more resilience. You're getting more innovation in some of those which are less regulated, and you're also then getting the advantage of this particular segment, which has been doing for such a long time.
Right. Yeah, I like the retail answer. I mean, retail is an interesting one because a lot of their IoT deployments are as much to capture more consumer side data to inform their operations, things like asset tracking, right? But also for experiential purposes. A lot of that data is then fed into
Contextual of what have you provided, best experience, best customer experience.
Exactly.
And that's really interesting. Yeah.
And so taking inspiration from that and applying it to the security and surveillance world may seem like, well, security and surveillance, you're not too concerned about the person who is on, downstream from the security having a good experience. If they're a bad actor, get them out of here. You know what I mean? But at the same time, there's a lot of security and surveillance applications that are not so intense. I mean, even just basic access control for a corporate or an educational campus. I mean, that should be something that, when all these IoT technologies are working in sync, when they're leveraging AI, that experience should be seamless for the end user, and so there's a lot to learn from it.
Great example that will be airports, right? Which is security, but its customer experience is really important, and particularly if people have choice about modes of transportation. So you have to blend in that additional element to it, even though it's really around security,
right?
Getting rid of bad actors. It's also making sure that they have a really great experience,
right?
Because they're using that as a service, yeah.
Right, exactly.
A lot to unpack there, but I think I can kind of pay attention to, if you want to hone in on the scope of security and surveillance, if you pay attention to kind of what's driving the trends. So I think one of the most important things is first stemmed from data. So data in terms of NDR storage, capturing all that footage and being able to store and analyze that data is the first major kind of trend. Second is the IoT devices. So I think a lot of the leading analysts, 75% of that data is going to be moved away from the cloud at the edge. Why? Is because you need to have that data closer to where the sensor is being generated.
Right.
And I think the third major pillar combining from data storage, IoT sensor is now the ability for that AI model to be kind of moved out to kind of do all that video analytics analysis in real time. So those are the major things that I kind of see for security and surveillance. But I think the last most important thing that no matter what industry that we're talking about and kind of the trend that we see is the autonomy.
Yeah.
I think being able to stitch the autonomy to where you're no longer leveraging some type of human element of that, whether it be for better productivity, efficiency, you're kind of creating that closed loop of autonomy where in each specific step, the agentic AI model will help either make a decision or give you an action for the human in the loop to actually make that decision for something else in future. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on in this industry, but it's, Jonathan mentioned, extremely exciting to be in compute. We're in another wave. There was mobile compute, cloud compute. Now we're in AI computing. So let's see where the future takes us. Exciting.
So edge AI computing.
Oh, yeah. The human in the loop component is important too. I mean, security and surveillance, so much of it is finding this balance between who's in the control room and who's actually making in the moment, real-time decisions or responding to threats, right? The human element, but then also how much of that can confidently be supported by AI without over-relying on the technology that then would miss something that contextually, that human in the loop is still going to be the best agent for sussing out and making a decision around. All right, y'all, I think we've covered most of everything here. we're really just scratching the surface. We could have dug into any of these one little areas for the whole conversation, but alas, we've got a trade show to attend and enjoy, so I'll let y'all break here. Thank you so much for your analysis today, and for sharing with our audience how Intel and Premio are working together to meet the current and future needs of the security and surveillance industry.
Appreciate it.
Again, folks, we've been chatting with Dustin C2 at Premio and Jonathan Wood with Intel. Jonathan, if folks want to learn a little bit more about the work that Intel is doing in the edge computing environment, how can they learn more? How can they get in touch?
Well, you can get in touch. You can reach me on LinkedIn, but you've got it accessible through our website. We have a lot of information online. You will see it's pretty much the trade show. We have a booth here as well, so please visit our booth here at ISC West. We'll be talking about our technologies of both an edge computing and some of the RealSense cameras that we have on display today. So don't hesitate to reach out. It's exciting.
Oh, yeah, it's a good time. And Dustin, same question to you. Where could folks learn a little bit more about Premio's role in the security and surveillance industry?
Yeah, the best place would be to visit either our website, previoinc.com. We have a wealth of thought leadership information. We have podcasts, but most importantly, we have decision toolkits that really help eventually going to leverage the benchmarks that we do with Intel, but most importantly, help them narrow down based on our product portfolio. What's the best industrial edge AI computer that will fit your workload for your application? So, yep.
All right, y'all, you heard it here. Make sure you check out both Intel and Premio's work in the space and keep your eyes peeled for how they're going to keep working together to lay some powerful edge computing foundations for the security and surveillance industry. We'll catch you on the next interview here out of ISE West 2025. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and we'll see you on the next one.